Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Brooke. I'm a survivor of abuse. I am a full-time mom caring for 9 children, and I have walked the road from broken to beautiful. This channel is where we expose the darkness, break the silence, and walk together from surviving to thriving. Today we're going to use what I like to call the 3w's. What the world says, what science says, and what God says. We're going to be covering a topic that's really important to me, and that's the topic of abuse is only physical. And let me be real with you. I've experienced both. I've experienced physical abuse and non-physical abuse. And it's the non-physical abuse that has been harder to heal from than the physical abuse was. It's the scars that you can't see. It's the wounds that cut deep that might be invisible, but they're just as real. And so together we're going to break this myth and we're going to knock it out and understand what abuse really is, and that it's definitely more than physical. So if you're ready, let's dive in. So first, we're going to cover what the world says. What's the stigma? Well, the world says that abuse really isn't abuse unless it's physical. It says that, unless if you have visible bruises or broken bones or maybe even a police report, then it's not really abuse. Society has created this hierarchy of harm where unless if there's physical violence, the abuse really isn't real. And everything else is just like what a bad relationship, maybe communication problems, or, maybe you're just being too sensitive. The stigma shows up everywhere. It's the questions that people ask, well, did he hit you though? Has he pushed you? It can't be that bad then. Or as if that's the only qualifier, Or in TV shows where we see this huge, dramatic, violent event as abuse, but we don't see the psychological warfare that happens behind closed doors. The world says that if you can't show visible proof of the abuse, then it's not real. Maybe you're just overreacting. Maybe you should try harder to get along with them. Maybe it's not that bad. You see, it's the belief that keeps survivors trapped because they think, well, he hasn't ever hit me, so I must be wrong about feeling this way. But you're not wrong. Emotional abuse is abuse. It's just as damaging as the physical abuse, if not more. The world says that emotional abuse is maybe just drama. Financial control is just them being better with money. Isolation from family and friends is them being protective and jealous of you, but in a cute way. And them constant criticizing you, well, that's just them caring so much about you that they want to fix you. No, the stigma is deadly. It keeps people trapped in dangerous situations longer. Mental and emotional abuse is just as bad as physical abuse. And I want to help break the stigma on that. I want to help make people realize that just because there's no visible marks doesn't mean that it's not abuse. And so together, this is what we're going to do. We're going to break the stigma. We're going to let people know that physical abuse is not the only kind of abuse. Now let's figure out what science actually says about this topic. Now let's talk about what science says about it. And before we start, I want to be real with you. I've experienced physical abuse. I know what it's like to have to cover up bruises and explain away injuries. And that's hard. But what's been harder to heal from is the emotional abuse. It's the words that told me I was worthless, that I'm still working to undo that damage. It's the constant criticism that made me question my own reality. And I still catch myself second-guessing decisions that I make, even though I know they're right. And it's the isolation that made me believe no one would ever want me. Yeah, that voice still whispers in my head sometimes. You see, the emotional wounds, those are the ones that keep bleeding long after you've left the situation. And science backs this up and validates what so many of us survivors have experienced. According to the CDC's National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey, approximately 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men have experienced physical violence by an intimate partner. But here's the scary part. They did another survey, and half of men and women in the United States have experienced psychological aggression by an intimate partner. That's half of the United States has experienced emotional abuse. Science recognizes abuse in many forms, not just physical. You know why this matters to me so much? Because for years I minimized what I was going through. I told myself, well, it's not that bad, or other people have it worse, or at least it's not happening all the time. But my body knew, my mind knew, and I was walking around in full-blown PTSD. And I didn't think I qualified for help or that I qualified for abuse because it wasn't always physical. But the brain scans don't lie. Neuroscience research shows us that emotional abuse causes measurable changes in the brain structure, particularly in the areas associated with emotional regulation and self-perception. So your brain actually changes and you start to think differently and feel differently due to the emotional abuse that you've endured. See, the trauma is real, the damage is real, and even when there are no visible scars. And here's something else that science tells us, that psychological abuse often precedes or accompanies physical abuse. So recognizing the patterns early is just as important and potentially life-saving, because you can see the red flags before the first punch is thrown, then you can get out and get safe faster. And even if it never gets physical, it's still abuse. Now let's talk about what God says. So God's words never limit abuse to just physical harm. In fact, the Bible speaks extensively about the harm caused by words or manipulation or oppression or the abuse of power before it ever gets physical. So Proverbs 12:18 says that the words of the reckless pierce like a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. See, God recognizes that words can cut deeply, that they pierce, that they cut, and that sometimes those cuts go deeper than any blade. Proverbs 18:21 tells us the tongue has the power of life and death. See, our words carry weight. They can build us up or tear us down. God takes emotional and verbal harm seriously. Jesus himself spoke about the damage caused by what comes out of our mouths. In Matthew 12:36-37, he says, "But I tell you that everyone will have to give account on Judgment Day for every empty word they have spoken. For your words you will be acquitted, and by your words you will be condemned." See, God cares about words, and he condemns the abuse of power in all of its forms, not just physical. Ephesians 4:29 instructs us, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of our mouths, but only what is helpful in building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." You see, that is the opposite of emotional abuse. God is instructing us to speak life into people, to build them up, to be helpful with our words. This is God's standard. And perhaps most importantly, God's design for a relationship is love, honor, and mutual respect. Someone who truly loves you doesn't tear you down with words. They don't manipulate you or try to control you. They don't isolate you or make you feel worthless. God's standard for how we treat each other encompasses our actions, our words, our attitudes, and our hearts. See, the God I serve, he's the God who sees every tear. He's the God who's counted every tear. He's the God who hears every cruel word spoken in private. And he knows the pain of being controlled, belittled, and broken down. And he calls it what it is. He calls it abuse. And he stands with survivors, and so do I. So I want you to know that you're not alone. And together with God, we can help break the silence on what abuse really is. So there you have it. The world says that abuse is only physical. Science says that emotional abuse can actually change the structure of your brain. And God's word tells us that He cares about how we treat each other in every way, not just physically, but emotionally as well. If you're watching this and you're recognizing patterns of abuse in your own life, even if it's not physical, I want you to hear this. What you're experiencing is real. Your pain is valid. Emotional abuse is abuse. You don't have to show someone bruises or physical evidence to prove that you're being hurt. You don't have to wait until it gets physical to get help. The invisible wounds are just as real, and they deserve just as much care and healing. If this video resonated with you, please like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. Let's break these myths together and help survivors, because it's important to let everybody else know that they're not alone and that what they're experiencing is real. And as always, remember, this channel is where we expose the darkness and break the silence, and where we go together from surviving to thriving. Together, we can make a difference.